All right. So the internet has been a little bit funky. We've dropped a couple classes today, so if that happens, just bear with us. We'll get it back on as quickly as we can. Tonight's meditation is my favorite. It's a question and answer. Usually we do that the first Thursday of the month, but I was out last week with COVID, and Miss Macy gave a great talk, and that means we're doing question and answer this week. I'm going to start off with a plug for a couple of Thursdays from now. It's the 23rd. Is going to be a wonderful night. If you can be here in person, great. If not, watch on Zoom so we can see your faces, or we'll probably be on Facebook and Instagram as well. But my Sifu Brown is going to be here, and the two people who are testing for their black sashes are going to be a big part of the meditation talk. We're going to do some questions and answers for them. You're going to hear some stuff from my Sifu, and it's going to be a very special night. So you've been hearing me talk about it. There's a seminar in the dojo that if you can come to before that, do that. But everybody is invited to the meditation class. It's going to start at 8. We'll probably go a little bit late that night. I'm guessing we'll go until 9 or probably not much further than 9. But tonight's question and answer, you just got me. And if you have a question already, you can go ahead and ask it. If you're thinking about your question, please don't do what I used to do, which was like, I'm going to craft the most impressive sounding question. When people hear this question, they're going to be shocked by how deep and insightful I am. Just ask something real to you. Don't worry about how it looks, but do try to ask it in a way that is to the point and makes sense. And there are no dumb questions. There are only dumb people. Dumb people are the ones who don't ask enough questions. If you've got questions on Zoom, go ahead and raise your digital hand. If you've got questions online and you want to just type it in the comments, you can do that. And if you've got questions here, raise your fleshy hand. I see one already from Kyle. Let's start with her. Go ahead.
So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your journey from being a student to becoming a teacher, especially because you have a really good teacher. You're like, they teach it the best. How can I possibly teach it, as well as them? Or it's like everyone should just take it from them, not I even.
I got it. Is there anything more than that, or that's what you want to give me so far?
That's the question, only because I'm in a different context. I'm in a similar situation.
Yeah, of course. I'll talk about it specifically with me, but I'll try to give you some general ideas that can help you too. So the question for those of you who didn't hear is just about my journey from going from being a student to being a teacher. And I'll tell you, it's not nearly as exciting as some other people's. My Sifu's story is really incredible. If you get a chance to hear from him, it's super inspirational. Mine was kind of as Kaya noted, like I've got an amazing teacher who is very dynamic. He's a wonderful speaker. He usually has lots of people sitting and watching his meditation classes. And there was definitely that feeling of why should anybody else teach? Well, who am I trying to fool? And there is like the imposter syndrome is real, especially in the beginning. And you might have that not even being a teacher at a school, but just being like a senior student. Sometimes you'll feel that way just trying to help another student in class, and I felt that way too. I'll say something that helped a lot was moving halfway across the country because my Sifu doesn't have a school here. So I was like, well, people probably aren't going to move to Michigan to practice martial arts if they live in LA, so I guess if I open up a school here, I'm the next best thing. And part of it a lot of my way of dealing with this has just been to do my best Sifu Brown impression. And that can only take me so far because I'm not Sifu Brown. I'm not supposed to be. Nobody should be exactly the same as anybody else. That would be weird. So I do what I can do. There's a big part of it that is, a constant, not a battle, but like a conversation with the ego of being able to set aside my own expectations for being a certain way. And part of this, I have it stuck in my mind, or historically had it stuck in my mind, where it's like, this is exactly the way that I'm supposed to be, and if I'm not exactly like this, then I'm failing. the truth is that there are, certainly there are at least a couple of things that I am more successful at teaching than my people, even if it's a small minority of it. But some people will get things differently when they hear it from somebody else, and this is why you really should take the opportunity when somebody else is teaching class, really try to show up and take those classes, because you might hear something in a different way that finally makes it click for you. Sometimes I get lazy and I just explain things the same way over and over again, and it's like hearing the same thing 100 times doesn't necessarily do it for you. But when you hear it or see it in a different way, that might actually make it work. So that's another thing for you to keep in mind, is there are people who are going to get it from a certain person, and they're going to get it the best way from that person. And there are some people who it will just not work for them, and they're going to have to get it from you in a different way. And so you want to kind of celebrate your differences, and what might seem to be a shortfall for you or a shortcoming can actually be a strength. It can be something that lends itself to really helping somebody who wasn't going to get it otherwise. So you might be in a similar geographic location where it might very well occur to you, like, I should just send everybody to my teacher, send everybody to this person, they're amazing. And you might decide to do that sometimes. But there is something for you to give to anybody. This is one of the most important things that I think we learn as a student, learning not only from the Sifu, the teacher, but learning from other senior students, whether they're teaching class or they're just working with you. You will learn things from junior students. I learn things from the students. So one of the things that we really recognize is that there are lessons to be had everywhere. And sometimes it's just going to smack you in the face. It's so obvious. But a lot of times it's more subtle. You kind of got to dig. And if you, I think, can encourage that in your students, then they will get stuff from you that you didn't even know that you were teaching. So be careful, because a lot of times it's just about teaching by example. And there are things that I do really well that I can't explain, and there are things that I can explain really well that I don't do so well, and sometimes this is the stuff that people are getting. And so this has been part of my journey, is recognizing that people don't always just listen to what I say. Sometimes they're getting what I'm doing. And this is true, like if I'm grappling with somebody and I can talk a big game about explaining how this escape works, and then try to do it, and it's like, it didn't work. Well, guess I better practice what I preach. So I think that is, it's one of the biggest compliments you can give to your teacher, is to really try to take on the things that you have learned and exemplify them, try to be the great example of that, and then other people will kind of get that from you. So this is like Gandhi says, be the change you wish to see in the world, and just be that example to the best of your ability. It's less about what you say, it's more about how you say it, but it's more about just what you're doing. So I'm not going to pretend to be a perfect teacher. I'm way better than I used to be. Come back in 30 years, I'll be way better than I am now. But I think the whole time the journey is just like reminding yourself that you're not supposed to be perfect, and you're not supposed to be exactly the way that anybody else was, and just kind of set that example, and people will take what they can from you. Other question? You're welcome. So
you mentioned something about how when you do the same thing over and over again, sometimes you get lazy and you just do it the same way. How can you work on being, I guess, more mindful in just everyday, mundane things, even though they're just a part of your routine and you do them?
Oh, I love this question. This is at the core of our practice. And for those of you who didn't hear it, the question is, when we do something day after day after day, how do we deal with that mindfully? And I think that the question is really like, how can I be totally present? How can I pour myself into what I'm doing, even if it's something that Doesn't seem super exciting now that it's the 100th or the 1000th time that I've done it. And look, you will have that experience in your martial arts practice. You haven't had it that much. You guys have only been here for like a year, but after you've been here for 20 years or 25 years, some stuff is going to start to feel like, ugh. Front punches, really, again? And Bruce Lee said that before martial arts, a punch was just a punch, a kick is just a kick. On the journey of learning martial arts, a punch is much more than a punch. A kick is much more than a kick. And after mastery, a punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick. And this, I'm sure, means different things to different people. What I take it to mean is, before martial arts, you have no idea the specialness of what this stuff is. You don't know anything about the details. It's like, okay, I don't get this. It's not necessarily mundane either, but it's like you just don't understand how to be like really in the present with it. Then when you start to learn martial arts and you start to really dig into the present moment, you start to recognize that every time you throw a punch, it's like an opportunity for a holy moment. It's an opportunity to be so present and so mindful and aware that it feels like an eternity is passing while you're throwing that punch. Or more usefully, while your partner's throwing a punch at you. If you're really mindful, it can feel like an eternity is there so you can actually move out of the way, right? And this is kind of the early to mid stage of your practice, but after a certain point, it becomes again like a punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick. And you might think that I'm saying that that is when things become mundane because you're used to throwing them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the opposite. This is my interpretation of this quote. Bruce Lee's dead, so he can't come back and correct me. My interpretation of this is that everything in life becomes that opportunity for a holy moment. Everything, if you master the ability to be so present in your martial arts practice, then you can take that into everything else. And now, everything else that seemed kind of like ho-hum or you didn't understand the significance of it, you can really pour yourself into that. And thus, a punch is just a kick and a punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick, because everything is special. Everything is an opportunity to be present. So, for sure, our practice is a wonderful opportunity for that. And just try to feel how that feels in class for you, right? When you recognize yourself kind of slipping into that mindset of, I know how to do that punch already. Don't let that happen. Shake it and come right back to the present and remember that this is your opportunity to be totally here and soak up as much as you can. As soon as you tell yourself, I know that, then you're killing the opportunity to learn. You're killing the opportunity to get better. And it's the same thing with anything in life. There is always some kind of opportunity. You can think of it as a holy moment or a special kind of energy that you pour into it, or you can just think of it like, this may be something that I've been doing for years. This may be something that I've been doing my whole life. What's the thing that you do the most that is the most boring, mundane thing? There's a specific answer that I'm looking for here. What is it? I'll give you a hint. You're doing it right now. You're not sitting all day. You're doing this thing all day long. Breathing. There's a reason why meditation is so hard, because you're just thinking about your breathing, the most mundane, boring thing. Unless you treat it in this very kind of special way. So, this is one of the big lessons in meditation, is if we can be totally present with the breath, then we can be totally present with anything. The breath is on some level incredibly boring. Again, if somebody's like pushing your head underwater, the breath gets very exciting very quickly. But if you are just looking for a way to kind of train yourself to really be present and really dive into any moment, meditation and focusing on the breath is a great one. Pretty fitting that is my answer in a meditation class, but it's absolutely true. There are a lot of things that we are doing either on purpose or subconsciously as we meditate, and this is one of them, is training ourselves to really fall in love with the moment and the mundane. So take that into something else, right? Walking. You walk all the time. If you have the ability to walk, you're probably doing it every day a lot. And when you do that, you're probably not usually focusing on the sensation of your foot hitting the ground or the way that you're shifting the weight from side to side. You're probably on your phone, listening to something, paying attention to anything other than this thing. Just like all day long, you're usually focusing on something else besides your breathing. So choose a small piece of whatever it is that you're doing and focus on that. And this comes full circle to a punch is just a punch. When you're trying to really be totally in the present, if you just allow yourself to just be doing the punching, going through the motions, there's nothing very exciting about that. But if you focus on a very specific thing that you're trying to improve, like making your fist perfect, right? Or making perfect contact with your top two knuckles. This, even if you are really good at it, focusing on that one specific thing is really kind of honing your attention. It's bringing you into the present moment with something. And so, when you're doing that with anything in life, it's going to have the same basic effect. Just hone in on one small detail of it, and I'll finish with this idea, with this question. One of the reasons that we are not in the present is because we are kind of rushing through it to get to the next thing. And life is a succession of moments. And each moment is an opportunity to be present or not. And so when we are busy thinking about what's next, maybe you're driving and you're like, can't wait to be out of this traffic so that I can be at the dojo. Or can't wait to be out of this traffic, leaving the dojo so I can be home watching TV, or whatever it is, right? This moment of being in traffic is it. This is life. Life is happening right now. And so the most mundane moments are the place where there is the most likely opportunity to dig in. And just remember that as you are allowing yourself to just be kind of ho-hum about whatever, that is life. That is, I don't even know what the percentage is. Let's just call it 99.9% of life. It's something that you're probably skipping over. Something that you're probably just totally not paying attention to because you're used to doing it and you're just excited for the next thing. It's great to be excited about something. Be excited about this, whatever this is now. Good luck. Other question. Nobody else at home has a question? Go, Tanya. You're always good for a question.
Kind of an old question. I think we talked about it a lot.
Great, I better be good at it.
How when we know that something is working really well for us, and we know that, but we stop doing it anyway, and we don't do it as much as we used to. Why do we do that? And why do we drive our feet, getting back to it, etc.? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, why are we so stupid? So, it's, Sifu Brown used to ask all the time, have you ever done something that worked so well that you stopped doing it? And so now I ask the question. And the answer is yes. People do this all the time. And part of the reason I think is we will get some kind of benefit from it, and so then we think like, okay, I did it. I'll give you a great example. As a lot of you know, I just got my black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu after 15 years. And most people, when they practice a style of martial arts, and I've seen this myself, it doesn't happen as often in our schools because people are really getting so much out of it. But I see this in martial arts. So many people get their black belt, stop coming to class. Because that was like the goal in their mind. And I think this is a part of the reason too, Tanya, is we have these misplaced goals or understanding of what we're doing. It's almost the same idea as like driving someplace and thinking like the goal of the drive is to get to the place. The goal is to be there in the present. So for a lot of people, they practice martial arts, they get to their black belt, and they think, that's it, I did it. And they forget all of the great things that they got out of it. And then they stop coming, and then they immediately get in bad shape. They immediately start to be like, oh, I'm just not in a good mood anymore. I don't know what that's about. Like, you used to really enjoy this thing. It was an important part of your day, and you stopped doing it. Of course, life is going to start to suck a little bit more from that. So I think part of it is just a misunderstanding of the goal, a misplacement of like what we're trying to achieve with whatever it is that we're doing. Stretching. If you think that the goal of stretching is to get to a certain like distance with your splits, for example, one of two things will happen. You will get there or you won't. And many people early on in their stretching journey come to this bleak realization that they will never get the splits. That was me. When I was a kid, I could do the splits, and now I'm an old crumbly man. I can't do the splits. And I stretch every day. And of course, for me, it's easy to stretch every day because I have to, because I'm teaching class, and it's purposefully part of me teaching is stretching every single day. But a lot of people, they will stretch for a while, and maybe they'll even get the splits, and then they'll stop because they'll be like, that's it, I guess I'm flexible for the rest of my life. I'll tell you, as somebody who did that as a younger person, if you take a few years off, it disappears very quickly. But what about the other 90% of people who will never get the splits? You stretch every day and never get the splits for your whole life. And if you decide that your goal is to get the splits, and then you're not getting it and it becomes painfully obvious that you're not getting it, of course most people are just going to stop. But what you're missing then is the opportunity to get as flexible as you can. What you're missing there is the opportunity to stay as healthy and get as much of the benefit as you will get out of it, which is way more than not stretching at all. Even stretching a little bit, even stretching with the understanding that you're not going to make it to the splits, right? And this is like, what's the splits? The splits is ego. The splits is, I am going to do this thing, and it's going to be really impressive, and if I don't get it, then I quit. What is not ego is being committed to the practice of stretching. So ego is attachment. I'm attached to getting the splits. And non-ego is I'm just committed to it. I'm committed to the process. I'm committed to the just practice of stretching. And so I think that this is, as most of our problems in life are, this arises from the ego, right? The ego is what basically decides that I'm going to give up on this thing, or, you know, allows you to be lazy and just no longer pursuing the same kind of practice that you've had before. And the ego is what makes you, as you said so eloquently, drag your feet to get back into it. Because very often the ego is thinking like, oh, I'm not going to be as good as I used to be. It's going to be so much work to get back to where I was. And you got to just laugh at that part of you because it's so ridiculous. If your choice, if we take stretching as an example, if your choice is between stretching and not stretching, and you're over here in the ego thinking, oh, it's going to be so much work for me to get back to stretching, and I'm probably never going to be as flexible as I used to be, and you might be right, but the only way you will get any benefit from it is to stretch. And you got to let go of the attachment of it, having it go a certain way. Being attached to getting the splits is like getting attached to any kind of success in life. Success is showing up. You show up to martial arts with the expectation of winning. You know, if you came to your first jiu-jitsu class in a long time and you thought, I'm going to win, of course you're going to be disappointed and you'll never show up again. But if you show up with the idea of, I'm going to show up, literally bowing onto the mats is success, then it's going to be very easy to be successful. We'll do one more. Free.
What criteria do you use to determine whether a student is ready to move on to the next SASH level? And how does that change based upon the level of the SASH? Is there intuition involved? Do you look at the person holistically, especially once they get more advanced? Are you looking at their personality and if they're able to handle the responsibility as they grow through the ranks?
Yes, to all of that stuff. So first of all, I do get this question a decent amount. I'll say there is a very low-level criteria that is actually quite hard to make for many people. And I know you've experienced this, and most people at some point in your practice will experience this. You got to be able to come enough, and this is time-wise and also like regularity of coming, and also you got to learn the stuff. So like at a more advanced level, like learning the form is part of it. And then there's stuff that gets thrown in the mix, like COVID and injuries and all of this. But if you are able to come enough for long enough and consistently enough, and you learn the forms that are needed at a certain level, so after yellow sash, all of the other ranks have forms that you're learning, for example, besides the other techniques. Then there are all the other kind of X factor things, like sure, do I think this person is going to be a good enough example at this rank? I'm not looking for perfection, and honestly, there's a big part of it where I basically just expect, like, once I give you the next rank, you better start acting like it, or I'm going to explain to you the way that you should be acting. If your technique doesn't kind of rise to the occasion, I'll spend a little bit of time with you to make sure that your technique is good enough to be that rank that you are. And I will say, it's just like what I was talking about in the beginning. It's not one size fits all. No two people should be exactly the same. I'm not holding you to the standard that I held for myself. That would be kind of ridiculous, because I knew after a year of starting martial arts that I wanted to do it for the rest of my life, and so I was coming like every single day. That's not reasonable for most people. But can you come in enough? Are you coming in like 2 times a week or more consistently? Are you putting in the effort? And there is some intuition, but I try to take that out of it as much as possible, because then it gets real wishy-washy. It starts to turn into like playing favorites, and I don't like to do that. Do I have people who, I think are a slightly better example of a rank? Sure, but it's not, I try not to make it too up in the air about that, because then it's really easy to start to turn it into something that's kind of impossible for people to meet these expectations. So, on a very basic level, it's like math. Are you doing it enough? Great. Have you learned the stuff? Great. Honestly, most people, by the time they come long enough and have learned the things that they have to learn, they're going to be a good enough person. You don't stick around in the dojo for as long as you have without being a decent person, because either you absorb the stuff that you need to absorb to be good, or you quit because you're like totally uninterested in being that way, right? And there are lots of people who come in and they're like, this is going to be fun, and then after a couple of months they're like, oh, I gotta meditate and I'm supposed to be a good partner and take care of the other people in class. Psh, I'm out, and they leave. And so those people never make it to a higher advanced rank. Usually they just kind of weed themselves out. But if you're asking what you need to do specifically, just keep learning your form. You're pretty close. And there are a lot of cases where, and I had this experience myself, there was somebody who started right after me, and this was for my white sash. They took a white sash test before I did, and I started like a month or 2 before them. And I had this thought right away of like, well, what's wrong with me? At that point, not knowing that I was going to someday be a black sash and season and all that stuff, I thought like, man, I just must not be very good at this stuff. And then it was like, well, what's so special about her that she got promoted before me? And I went through all the stages of, you know, anger and grief and all that stuff in like a week, and then Seafood Brown put me in the next test, and I was like, yeah, that's right. So a lot of testing is a great opportunity to deal with the ego. Like I was talking about at the end of last class, a big part of our practice, like you show up to spar and, you know, somebody's hitting you and you're losing, you're going to have an emotional response to that. And you're going to have lots of emotions around testing, whether you're doing it and it's a really hard test, or you're thinking about when am I going to test, or all of that stuff. And this is kind of part of it, and I'm okay with you having some emotions about it, and I'm okay with the ego being involved, because that is the opportunity that is there to let go of it and to just dive into the process. So I will tell you this, there has never been a black sash, or even probably a red sash, that has not had to just completely let go of the dream of getting to a certain rank by a certain time, because it never happens as quickly as you want it to. It is always coming down to just giving into the process and just enjoying it. Enjoy showing up for class, enjoy getting as much as you can out of that class, and if it's meant to happen that you'll get to the next rank, it will happen. If it's not meant to happen, you can still get so much out of your practice. And as you probably have guessed right now, it's very unlikely that anybody makes it to a black sash. So if you have that as your goal, I'm going to be a black sash someday, get ready to be disappointed. But if you have it as your goal to show up and get as much as you can out of every practice, then you will never be disappointed. And this is, like I also said in the last class, a big part of happiness in life is lowered expectations. If your expectation is to show up, then you're going to get a lot. If your expectation is I have to be at a certain level, I have to be at a certain rank, I got to be able to beat this person and that person, get ready for a long, long journey of disappointment. So, in meditation, you might also have some very specific goals in mind. You might be really expecting to have a certain quality of meditation. That's also going to lead to disappointment. So just sit comfortably. Your meditation might be great, whatever that means. Your meditation might be terrible, whatever that means. But if we are happy to just sit and breathe, and when the mind wanders, bring it back to the breath, and that's time well spent. Close eyes, spine straight, eyes upturned.